Hello everyone, back at it again in my little yellow kayak. I just launched the kayak. We've got beautiful conditions today. Overcast skies, cool temps. It's almost a little foggy out. The only thing I wish was just a little bit more wind, but we're going to make this work. So the first thing I'm going to do is paddle across the lake and then start working my way back. This part is always easier in fast forward mode. Not much to do except put your head down and paddle. You can extend your range by changing up your grip and changing your technique. Instead of pulling the paddle towards you, you kind of punch left, punch right. I've mentioned this in a bunch of videos, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it. But the fish were a little bit slow to start, which kind of surprised me given the conditions. I thought I was going to run into busting fish everywhere and just have a great time. But it took a while. It seemed like it took a while for the fish to wake up. But when they woke up and decided they wanted to eat, man, it was good fishing. I brought 4 rods with me. I've got 2 freeloaders rigged up on spinning rods. I've got a super fluke, a full-size super fluke in the albino shad color on a casting rod. I like that albino shad color in cloudy conditions like this. So no flake. Because my theory is anyway that you want flake when the sun's out so it has some place to reflect, and when there's no sun you're better off with solid colors like albino, and I've just done really well with it, and that's kind of a theme I keep going with. And my 4th rod, I can only bring so many rods on the kayak, but my 4th rod is a topwater, and that is a JT115 in the Wakasagi color. Anyway, I eventually ran into some fish that were willing to eat, and the first lure I got one on was a super fluke. I've got that on a Gemakatsu 3-aught hybrid worm hook. Makes a great fluke hook too. That rod is a 610 medium Shimano X Pride. It's also a great jerkbait rod. It's a great blade bait rod. It's a pretty good topwater rod. But I like it for flukes too. You could cast a weightless fluke pretty well. And you can set the hook as long as you have a thinner diameter wire on your hook. It's not great with something like a superline hook. Superline hook, you really want a medium heavy instead of a medium rod, so you can get that extra gauge of the hook through the plastic and through the fish's cheek. Anyway, it worked out. So the game plan for today is that if I don't have any fish showing, like right now there's no fish busting bait or chasing bait, I'm going to fish low and slow with the Crush City freeloader. I'm starting out with a chartreuse and white color, so I cast it out, let it hit the bottom, give it a couple quick pops to get it up off the bottom, and then it's just a slow shaking retrieve. I'm shaking with my right hand. I'm shaking my wrist mostly with my right hand. It's not crazy shake, just enough to get that bait rocking and rolling. And then I'm slowly winding with my left hand. And the fish track it. They come up behind the bait and they smoke it. So this is a great way to fish. I've found anyway in the past few days since I've been fishing it, a great way to fish when there's no fish showing, no fish busting, no active fish. And I can add a bunch of fish to my total using this Crush City freeloader. And I was fishing around some points, but I was also just blind casting into a basin area where there were schools of fish hanging around bait. I don't have any electronics on my kayak. I certainly don't have any forward-facing sonar, so I'm blind fishing this freeloader. And I'm having pretty good luck with it over the past few days, so I'm just going to stick with it. Not a bad start with the freeloader. I got that one other one on the fluke too. It's funny, but once these fish decide that it's time to eat, you can see them in the top middle part of the screen there. It's go time. They get super charged up. And even in different parts of the pond, they'll start popping up almost like it's synchronized, like some internal bell or alarm clock went off in their heads. Okay, it's time to start feeding, and they all start going. So when they're showing on top like that and they're close enough, I can hit them with a weightless fluke. I like throwing the weightless fluke at them. They seem to eat it really well. It's a single hook. That one's real skinny. I don't know what's wrong with them, but yeah, with the fluke, it's a single hook. It sticks them really well and it holds them really well. And I like that. It doesn't do a lot of damage to the fish. They release really nicely. And it just works out for me. That last skinny fish pulled me a little bit closer to the school. Maybe I was just outside of them, but I was definitely closer. So I decided to drop that freeloader over the side and use it like a Damiki rig. So I'm just hovering that bait in place underneath the boat. I'm probably down about 20 feet, over 25. Again, I don't have any electronics. I'm just kind of guessing here. But I know from past fishing trips that these fish come up for the bait and then they feed and then they drop back down. They drop back down fairly low. You know, they might not go all the way to bottom, but they drop back down low. So I'm kind of picturing in my head where I think those fish are going to end up. And just by shaking the Damiki rig down there, I can get a few more stragglers from the school. Like that one right there. Plus the fish were pretty charged up, so adding a few more to my total. And that one, I'm trying to show it on camera, but that one had a herring down its throat and he still ate the freeloader. That worked so well, I'm going to do it again. Just make sure my freeloader's okay. I've got a loop knot on the nose, and so it hangs pretty well if you just drop it straight down. It won't hang completely horizontally, but close enough. So I let it get down to the bottom, and then I crank it up maybe 5 feet off the bottom. Yeah, something like that. I missed one right away, too. I bet he was watching it fall, and then when I popped it up off the bottom, he was on it, missed it, and then came back for a second shot. Or maybe there's a bunch of fish down there. I just don't know. But anyway, that's another way you can fish the freeloader. Instead of a slow shaking retrieve, you can just drop it over the side of the boat and fish it like a Damiki rig. And I got another fish. That one's a little better than the last one too. Nice. I saw some fish pop up and they're a little bit out of range for the fluke, but I can hit them with the JT115. The JT115 is a silent walking bait made by Evergreen. It has a tendency to want to dive under the water, so I dress the rear treble with some crystal flash, and that little extra resistance keeps it up on top a little bit better. Anyway, it was good enough to fool a fish. Casts pretty well. It doesn't have a weight transfer system. It's completely silent, so everything inside the bait is fixed in place. It's balanced pretty well, casts well, but it's completely silent. And I like silent walking baits when we don't have any wind, like right now. I feel like it gets them a little bit better than a hard knocker or something with a lot of rattles. I want those BBs and knockers when there's wind. And we don't have a lot of wind right now. The main thing though is that JT115 can launch, and so I can reach them. And they'll hit, when they're active on top, they'll hit a lot of different baits, even with a rattle, even with no wind. But if I'm going to do it, I want to try to be as dialed as possible. So anyway, the JT115's working for me, and I'm going to stick with it. Some fish popped up behind me. Always seems like they're behind me. But they were close enough to reach with the fluke, and so that's what I reached for. I've got 3 rods on the deck right now, which is really not a great idea in this little kayak, but I was just trying to juggle a bunch of different things at once, and you know, if they pop up close to me, I want that fluke in my hand. If they pop up far away, I want the JT115. And if there's no fish showing, I want that freeloader, and I've got a little bit of a mix of everything right on the deck there. Anyway, got another one on the fluke. It's fun fishing the fluke. And that bait's only running probably 6 inches below the surface of the water, 6 to 12. And so when the fish hit it, they come up from below and they hit it almost like a topwater. So to me, it's a lot of fun working a fluke and having the fish come up from underneath and hit it. Not a bad one, a little fatter. Eating those herring. There he is. Thanks for playing, bud. Alright, if you look closely, you can see some fish pop up in the middle of the screen. They're a little far out of reach for the super fluke, so I grabbed the JT115. And you can see multiple schools of fish popping at once. Again, that seems to happen. They have this internal synchronization. I don't know what else to call it, but once they start going, they all start going. And that's a different species. That's a little smallmouth. I guess he's not that little. Maybe a little skinny. But he couldn't resist the JT115. And I believe that smallie went after the rear dress treble. So not only does it help balance out the bait and keep it on the surface and prevent it from wanting to dive, just that little extra resistance, but it gives the fish something to aim for. And maybe a little bit of an attraction quality too. Anyway, it doesn't seem to hurt, and that fish seemed to like it. This next fish was a bit of an odd one. I cast out the freeloader, there's no fish showing, and then I heard something. I heard some fish splashing, I think behind me on the right. So I decided I'd reel in that freeloader and cast something else at him. But in the process of reeling in the freeloader and reeling a little faster, see, there they are, there goes the fish behind me. And I decided I'm gonna reel in that freeloader and cast the fluke or the JT115 at him. I'm reeling really fast here, and I got bumped. I paused, and then I had a fish on. So that was really interesting to me. I wasn't fishing the freeloader with a shaking retrieve. I was just reeling it in, and reeling it pretty fast too. So I wonder if there's a place for just reeling the freeloader slow without any shaking, and also maybe like a speed reeling technique, and then you kill it and then reel again fast. I have to play around with this bait some more, but that kind of piqued my interest that smallmouth would chase that freeloader down, hit it, and then I paused it, started reeling again, he came back for it. And it's not a bad smallie either. Sometimes they like to chase things. If you give them something to chase, they might chase it. After that last fish on the chartreuse and white freeloader, I decided I better retie. I'm fishing with a loop knot. A loop knot's not the best knot, and I feel like any little abrasion or signs of wear above or below the knot, I'm better off retying. And then I put a little tiny dab of super glue on the knot to make sure it doesn't slip out. And I also glue the freeloader back on the jig head to make sure that doesn't slip. So anyway, I switched to an albino shad freeloader, and I gave it a couple pops off the bottom. Did you see that? A couple hard pops, almost like fishing a jig. And there was a fish on it immediately. Decent largemouth bass. And this is, a fresh jig head. I haven't fished this before today. It's a new knot. Maybe I was putting a little bit too much pressure on him, but the knot ended up popping. And I hate that. So maybe I could have reduced the drag a little bit more. You see me working the drag. He's pulling the boat a little bit. Maybe I could have gone a couple more clicks on the drag. And he took one final dive by the boat, and my knot popped. I'm kind of in shock, in disbelief there. And it's disappointing. Disappointing to lose a fish like that. Disappointing to leave him with the jig head. I'm trying to think what I did wrong. It was a fresh knot. I hadn't been fishing that bait. Maybe it was a bad knot. I don't know what happened there. But I decided I was going to put that rod up and deal with re-rigging at home and just fish the other 3 rods that I brought with me. So I went back to the other rod with a chartreuse and white freeloader. Seemed to work almost as well as the albino shad, or maybe even better. Same procedure. I cast it out, make a big long cast with that 1/4 ounce jig head. The thing flies through the air pretty well. Pop it off the bottom. Slow, steady reel with some shaking. Getting that bait to flip-flop left, right, left, right, left, right. And then wait for something to come up behind it and suck it in. I still haven't been cut off by a pickerel using this technique either, which is a big bonus for me because there's a lot of pickerel in here and they can be a menace. Now this time I'm going to make sure that my drag is a little bit loose instead of a little bit on the tighter side. And if that fish wants to run, I'm going to let him. Try not to break off any more fish today. I'm also wondering if I could go up and pound test. So far I've been fishing the freeloader with 6-pound Yozuri hybrid, because in my mind it's kind of a finesse technique. But maybe I should bump up to something with the diameter of maybe 12-pound line and see if the fish will still go for it. Because if they'll still go for it, like I fished the super fluke with 12-pound Yozuri hybrid, and they go for it fine. So I'm thinking if I can bump up and pound test, still catch the same number of fish, then I'll be in better shape in terms of keeping those fish pinned. I can put a little bit more pressure on them, get them in the net faster, and hopefully not break off any. But again, that loop knot, you're always, you're at more risk than a double line knot like a Palomar or double uni or whatever your favorite double line knot is. Nice fish. He took it kind of deep, but he's all right. It seemed like as the morning wore on, there was less fish showing on top, and so that meant I was leaning more on the Crush City freeloader than on the fluke and the topwater, the GT 115. But that's just fine with me. I do have to experiment a little bit more with different retrieves, see what the fish seem to like the best. There's also a bunch of other strolling baits or jig and minnow type baits that I have to try out. I do have a bunch of Z-Man jerk shads that I think will be pretty good. I could give those a try. I ordered some Yum forward-facing sonar minnows because they had some different colors than you can get in other brands, and they're around the same size. And those Yum baits are cheap too. I think they're $3.50 a pack. I've got some of the 3-inch ones for drop shotting, and they come in a little pack that you could fit in a pocket. And if you were, I don't know, maybe stream fishing or something, they're a good bait at a low cost, and the packaging is just so nice and easy to fit almost anywhere. And I got another bass on the freeloader. Here I am talking about the sonar minnow. I should be talking about that chartreuse and white freeloader. Anyway, I'm looking forward to trying some new baits, or new baits to me, in new sizes, and seeing which ones work best at different conditions and different lakes. Sometimes different lakes, the bait fish that you have there have different colorations. Sometimes the herring can be more golden in color, at least around me. And other times they have more like a darker gray back and like a purplish hue on the side. Anyway, the coloration can vary. And sometimes trying to match the hatch can pay off in more fish. This next fish goes crazy when I hook it. Still fishing the chartreuse and white freeloader. And smallmouth was, I think, tracking it most of the way to the boat. And then when he hit it, he wasn't too far away from the boat, and he just goes straight up. You'll see it in a second. Yeah, he's fairly close to the boat at that point. Goes straight up and whips that freeloader at my head. Ugh. There's a couple downsides to fishing the jig and minnow, and that's one of them. The fish can throw that bait more easily than they can a weightless fluke or something like that, where you just have a single hook in them without the weight of the jig head on the front. And then the other place that I found the freeloader doesn't really work well for me is when there's that stringy, clingy weeds near the bottom. Just gets all gummed up in that stuff, and you're better off fishing a weedless swim bait or a fluke or something else like that. I heard some fish popping bait, but I couldn't quite see where they were until they popped up when I was looking at them. Off to my left. Toss the fluke in there. Yeah, as long as they're in close range, I like that fluke better. Sometimes you don't even have to move it that much. I usually let it fall a little bit before I start working it. And you can do a bunch of different retrieves with a fluke. One that is kind of cool when the fish are busting bait is you can put that rod straight up in the air and just have a slow retrieve. And what that does is make a V-wake on the surface. And sometimes that's the deal. I haven't had to do that recently because the fish have just been so cooperative. But sometimes that single bait V-waking on the surface, it just gets them really fired up. And it's a fun way to fish a fluke. It's almost like topwater fishing. Alright, I've had a great morning out here. Caught a lot of fish, largemouth and smallmouth. That really has more to do with the weather and the fishing conditions than me, per se. I mean, I put myself in the position to get lucky, but the reason these fish are charged up and willing to eat so well is all because of the weather. Overcast, cloudy, it's early morning still, and these are the kinds of conditions where a lot of people will stay indoors. They don't want to go fishing just yet. They want to wait till it's 90 degrees and bright and sunny. No. You got to get out there early, get on the fish while they're active, and everything's so much easier. I'm doing that V-waking on the surface now with a super fluke just to see if they'll go for it. But I'm kind of running out of time here. The best bite was earlier in the morning. The star of today was probably that Crush City freeloader in the chartreuse and white. They really like that bold color. Not sure if they can see it better or it just looks different than the other bait fish. Whatever the reason, they liked it. I also caught a few on the super fluke in the albino color and the JT115 in the Wakasagi color. So thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it. I know I've rattled off a bunch of lures and hook sizes. Just like all my other videos, I'll put it in the video description so you can just scroll down there and see exactly what I was using, so you can duplicate what I was doing out here today and hopefully have some good success wherever you might live. I mean, there's herring lakes all over the country, shad lakes, and they all fish fairly similarly. When the fish are up and busting bait, you can use these techniques to catch them. Alright, I'll catch you on the next one. See ya!